I've been meaning to finally play through Secret of Mana on the SNES. Being the completionist that I am, I decided to dive deeper back into the real first Secret of Mana game, which is Final Fantasy Adventure on the Game Boy. Developed and published by Square and released in North America in November of 1991, Final Fantasy Adventure is actually Seiken Densetsu Final Fantasy Gaiden, or otherwise known as Secret of Mana. Pretty cool, right? Roughly, the story follows the trials and tribulations of the hero Sumo and the heroine, Fuji. The infamous Dark Lord and his assistant Julius are up to no good, and they are trying to destroy the legendary Tree of Mana, which would then put their world in a not-so-ideal situation. As the game starts, you take control of Sumo, as he tries to escape imprisonment upon learning of the evil Dark Lord's goals, and then have at it. Final Fantasy Adventure is an action RPG akin to The Legend of Zelda. Its top-down camera view in square scrolling areas quickly give that comfortable feeling if you're used to playing these types of games. There's an overworld, many different caves, dungeons, towers, etc. that you explore, likely with a purpose such as important items and magic spells to progress further into the game. You defeat enemies through the use of various weapons and magic spells, thus gaining experience points and GP to purchase items and sleep at recovering inns in the towns. The leveling system is fairly simple. You have the choice to either upgrade your stamina, attack power, wisdom, which is your magic, or your willpower, which is essentially your special meter. This will allow it to fill up faster in order to use your weapon-specific special moves. There are a wide variety of weapons, armor, and magic upgrades throughout the course of the game, many of which provide features that are not just simply higher attack and defense, but for example, axes will be able to cut down trees, chain flails will be able to latch onto poles to get to hard to reach areas, certain shields will deflect certain spells, and the ice spell will be very important in helping solve future dungeon puzzles. The controls overall are pretty tight. The music is decent, there are a couple of pretty damn good tracks and a couple that are a bit forgettable. It being on the Game Boy, I don't give it too much flack for being repetitive or a bit bland at times. The graphics are what they are, pretty standard for what you'd expect from a top-down Game Boy RPG from 1991. Lastly, the difficulty is average and very fair. There were a few instances where I struggled a bit, but the good news is this game allows you to save whenever and wherever you are. No save points. This helps greatly with room for error. You also have the ability to quick reset by pressing the select, start, B, and A buttons together at the same time, also a very valuable tool. A couple of tips to help make your experience easier: make sure to not neglect wisdom because magic is incredibly helpful in the dungeons. Also, if you're a good button masher, boss battles typically can be cheesed to a certain extent. Final Fantasy Adventure, or the first entry in the Secret of Mana series, is a solid Game Boy action RPG. I had fun, I always wanted to come back for more, but at the same time this is not incredibly groundbreaking. My main gripes with the game are that at the beginning, the item navigation mechanics can be a bit clunky, and even after learning, they are still very dated. And my god, you talk to people in this game by merely bumping into them. Sometimes walking through towns can be the biggest headache, and in a way, the hardest enemies in the entire game are the townsfolk. You better avoid them or risk bumping into them and get the dreaded dialogue prompt. All in all, I highly recommend this game to anyone who's a fan of RPGs or action RPGs. Since it's on the Game Boy, it has the ability to be portable, which I know is ideal to a lot of people. The game also has been remade/re-released a couple of times, so you have a couple of different options to choose from. I give Final Fantasy Adventure on the Game Boy a 7.5 out of 10. The aforementioned gripes take some points off, and the other points are taken off due to it. Honestly, it's at times a little generic, but no doubt this is still definitely worth a playthrough. Until next time.